All right, well, come on, gather around. So what a great crowd. So my name's Andrea Bubula. I'd like to welcome you to Lowry Hill Gallery. This is our third exhibition. We opened March 7th of this year, and it's been really wonderful. Thanks in such a large part to my fantastic stable of artists and wonderful, wonderful guests. So thanks everyone again for being here. This is a special exhibition of Thomas Paquette's work. I won't go into too much detail. I know that he has really wonderful things to tell you about the show. You'll stick around after the talk. We'll have our formal opening reception. We'll have refreshments, and you can have a really terrific look at all of the pieces that I think Tom will talk about. So there will be questions afterwards for Thomas. So please think about what you'd like to ask him. And he's really helpful, as I think you all know. Anyway, so thank you. Thanks, Thomas Paquette.
Good to see you all here. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it a lot. And you get to see this wonderful new gallery that, as she said, just opened. So it's really an honor to be showing here as well. And I'm happy to be part of the stable, as you put it. I'm going to start with talking about half of you are related to me here. I know I come from a large family. So if you're wondering, how did you get such a crowd? Get a large family, it helps. And 11 kids, so it really was, and then extended. But I bring that up in particular because when I was a child, my parents would take these long trips that most of us remember across the country. My dad started getting a couple months off in the summer, and we would go to the West Coast for however much gas there was available, and they'd get as many kids in the car as they could fit. Anybody left over had to stay home. Looking at you guys. No, Leo, you were actually on the first one, I remember. Yeah. So anyway, that I think became part of my lived experience of being in nature and just always wanting to seeing all the facets of nature that I could. And that leads into another part of this talk in about a minute. But that's when I was very young. We would go to the art museum and I would see Van Gogh's work. That I remember that specifically as just being like a wow moment for me when I was a young child. And always, everybody grows up with crayons in their hand. And maybe it's because being one of 11, being the eighth, by the time they got to me, it's like they didn't bother taking the crayons out of my hand. In fact, I remember when I told my parents I was going to study art in school, most of your parents would be more concerned, kind of going into shock, right? And they'd say, don't do it. But they said, I remember my mother saying, you kids, you just do whatever you want and you always land on your feet. Because she'd already been through all the other ones and realized this is going to work. Go ahead. Well, that could have been a mistake. I started at the U of M, and because another thing about being in a large family, I realized I had to pay for college myself. It was a lot less expensive before, but when I started at the U of M, and I only wanted to study art, and I knew that, so I was supposed to follow whatever the dictates of the what do they call them, advisor. So it was actually like a grad student, and well, you can't just take art classes. That's all I'm going to pay for. It's all I'm going to do. And he said, no, I just can't do that. And I said, oh, okay. Well, give me another one of those cards and we'll fill it out. And I just filled it out the way I wanted to. And I had all my art classes. It was great. It didn't last very long though. Within half a year, I decided to hit the road and be a professional hobo, a bum in a way. I started hopping freight trains because I had to move ever since. I can pin it back on mom and dad, can't I? Isn't that how that works? Just seeing the countryside. I've always been interested in nature, as you can tell from my paintings. I did other things when I was studying in college, but the nature is what I painting nature and landscapes is where I started out and ended up. In between, I did other things. But so I traveled for quite a while, off and on for about 7 years. I was hopping freight trains and hitchhiking around the country. And that'll be a book later on. And 7 years. Oh, it took about 7 years, and I had finally gotten a BFA. It was 7 years, 4 colleges, and 1 trade school for welding. And I got my BFA in painting from way up north, Bemidji, Minnesota. And then a few years later, I finished my master's degree at Southern Illinois University in painting. And then I didn't know where to move exactly, and I don't know, I started showing around the country. I moved to Portland, Maine, and was showing in Minneapolis first, actually. I first showed here, and then St. Louis and Chicago, Washington, Boston, Maine, New York City. So this show is about old growth forest, a lot, in large part. It's not all. This is actually a view near my home where I live in Pennsylvania. But I've been very interested in old growth forests. I realized I always was. Every time we'd go somewhere where nature just had its own presence for all these years without the impact of human beings, humanity changing, altering, cutting down, plowing, whatever, from time immemorial, it always interested me. There's something really deeply special about those places. And I have occasionally painted them over time. But maybe it's as I'm getting older, I feel like old growth forest is really it's a topic that just really, it takes a lot to dive into because it's so complex. And there's just so much life within all those ecosystems that how do you represent that well? I started to realize though that, let's see what I actually wrote. Way off topic. Well, if you look at some of my paintings of old growth forests, like this one and the one over there, and other ones throughout, over the many years of painting, I used to paint with very thick paint, and but over time I went thicker and thinner, and then I wound up with this kind of, a lot of paint gets removed in my process. So I'll paint on many layers, scrape it off. Sometimes it gets thrown away, but it in itself is its own kind of ecosystem where things layer over each other. And sometimes there's a forest fire, metaphorically speaking, where the whole thing gets kind of trashed. They start all over. And so that's how I feel like I'm emulating the old growth forests in these works, are these layers of history. And this is where Andrea came up with the title for the show of Living History, was that these old growth forests are in themselves a living history, just the eons of life shifting over various forms from seabeds to what we see today. And that I try to get across because I just find it an intriguing subject, and I feel at home there. In fact, I was just made aware, maybe, Ellen, what was a couple of years ago, I was walking through our little woods, and there was a tree that had fallen over, and so I took a handsaw to it. That's how I cut down the trees there, little trees, nothing too big. But it was down, and I needed to have the path go through there, so I had to cut the log in half, and it was exhausting because it was a really dense piece of wood. I cut through it, and I thought, well, while I'm sitting here in the snow and cooling down a little bit, I'm going to count those rings, because I knew every ring is a year. And they were so tight packed. It was only this big, 18 inches, the log, and I got to 300, and I couldn't read them anymore. They were so small. It was about 300, probably fell over 20 years ago, and all of a sudden we're back in like the year I was born. And also, landscape itself in general is like an open book of history, because there's just so much going on there. Because it is all these interactions with weather and climate and geological conditions, and we seem to be the most tyrannical force out there today. But written large, the picture is bigger. The worlds we're shifting are themselves this longer history of, oh, yeah, I didn't mention this, of the cooperative qualities of everything, especially in an old growth forest. It's everything, everything affects each other. And that's what I try to paint is this cooperation, not just the history, but the way that things cooperate between themselves. And it's not, for instance, not an antagonistic force that we can actually defeat without defeating ourselves. So I feel that in painting these, and oh, I don't know the end of that sentence, so I'm going to stop right there. Battles are temporary tyrannies and all that sort of thing are like forest fires to the forest, where it really, really can alter it greatly. But the greater history is actually what came before and the vibrant new worlds that follow. And I just, as I'm painting these, I'm thinking about the forces of nature. I'm not trying to replicate the look of things so much as trying to make them uh, do what nature does. So it's just paint. It's limited until mold starts growing on them. It's going to be what I do to it, not too much of nature. So it's all contrived in a way. Oh, yeah, I was supposed to say something about um, who's laughing? I knew it. That's fine. No, it's great because I was working on this just a couple hours ago. I've been collecting thoughts for a few weeks about this, and I have other statements I've made. And just before I got here, I had the hotel printed up. So what I'm looking at is very fresh. But I was going to talk a little bit about history, and we're at the 250th anniversary of breaking off from a perceived tyrant who half of you in this room would call great, 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 great grandpa King George III. So, but fortunately, we fought here in the States and won. So that's all good. But the there's history like that, and that's the history of all this, change that is abrupt and all that. But the impact that I feel I'm responding to, and what I try to bring to my own work, is that idea of the bigger picture of cooperation and things that aren't the reflexive obedience to a preconceived arrangement. It's something that I don't know, a more perfect union, maybe. I don't know, something along those lines. Uh, as you look at my work, you're going to recognize that I might be into detail, but it's not the detail of Frederick Church painting, for instance, where just astonishing paintings from the 19th century uh, and his ilk, those the Hudson River School group of people that it's a great inventory of well-defined, well-shown uh, pictures of these species, and everything's like very accurate or believably a believable space. What I'm after is the integrity of the painting itself working with the detail of paint. And so they become a little bit abstract maybe for some people, but to me it's an equivalence. And that's really what I'm after in the work. I encourage that sort of chaos, and works can look inchoate, hinting at a greater reality that eludes our humble knowledge. Because after all, it really comes down to not knowing everything as human beings. And I always get this idea when I'm painting that these landscapes they're kind of grown like nature. So, or just happening on the canvas as opposed to my trying to control it and make it look precise. And something else I think about often is when people ask, well, maybe I'll have somebody ask it later. Why do artists paint? You think about that, and I think I've never heard this before put this way. Probably a thousand other people have said it, but artists, we make the artwork. I paint to see what I need to see, and it's just kind of that simple. I want to see this place again, or I want to see these colors together, and it's just something that I need to get out and paint on the walls. I am going to not read anymore. I will take any questions, and I don't know. There are some books here that are from prior exhibitions. One exploring the Mississippi River from its source to the Gulf. That was in a show that traveled up and down the Mississippi a bit. And then I have this other book here that you're welcome. It has it's filled with just these little tiny paintings that are reproduced full size, and they are called gouache paintings. It's the nature, it's the name of the medium. It's a watercolor, but there's a show with practically the same title opening next week at the Erie Art Museum. So if anybody has any questions, yes.
I don't know about the temperate at all.
You wondered how much time this represents, all these paintings, and they are, I think the earliest one in here was started maybe 10 years ago, but they often get repainted over time so much. Most of them are within the last year. What else can I say about that? Looking around.
I'll recommend. Yeah. When we're being done.
Well, this one right here was done about a week before I brought it out here, but it was actually in an exhibition before this, and completely I painted most of it over. If there's an ad in this magazine that has that painting in it, if you look closely, you'll see that I changed it since it came out in the May edition of this magazine. Yeah, it's here on this page. I'll just leave it open here. It's kind of minor changes, but there were things that I realized that sometimes knowledge gets in the way. I realized that I thought, no, what was that species of tree again? And I realized that was, what was it? Maple tree. And I was painting it like more like a hemlock, which grows a lot around us. And hemlocks will have these lower branches coming out. And it wasn't really a branch. So I changed a broken branch into something a little different, which it had on it, but I neglected to do anything but follow the paint. So a lot of these, I'm just following the paint, and sometimes I correct them for some kind of scientific or understanding that I have that I don't want to throw out there as wrong.
When in your process are you looking at actual?
Where in the process am I looking at this actual place?
Like, is that a tree that you walk past and saw it?
Oh, yeah. Yes. In this particular tree, I had gone to I was out exploring old growth forests all around the country in the eastern half. Harder to find it there. And that one, I don't think I did a gouache for that. I will not start oil paintings outside anymore. I do little gouache paintings, and I take photographs, and I do sketches. And this one, it became its own thing after a while, but it definitely is resemblant of something that I walked past and was enamored by. Yeah.
So the small gouache, are those done outside with clear shooting bags? You guys in the park?
Yes, some are. They're kind of their own thing too. Some they all almost always get repainted in the studio because I just like painting over things. So I don't really call myself a plein air painter because most of the plein air painters I know start a painting and they're done in 2 hours. Maybe they'll touch it up a little, but I don't do that. I rework things, and they're not studies. They're almost always explorations. They're like looking for a new way. Even if they're supporting a larger painting, they're looking for a new thing that I might find within that little gouache to paint, just to be, it's got to be entertaining to myself. So I'm looking for ways to not only think about a bigger painting, but it becomes its own thing. And sometimes the little gouache gets done even years later than a big painting, just because I go back and forth. And it's been characterized as kind of a conversation that I put my pieces between. So I'll start on one, and it'll suggest an idea. I'll work it out there, and then that'll suggest something. It goes back and forth. Yes.
Oh, it was up at Sarah's studio. And I see then it out every and this represents really I'm like this memory of my huge lads.
Yeah.
Blue and purple. That's the in the next day, it's all red. We that is why Kirkland was just 1/7 inch line at the bottom.
Huh.
It's just amazing to see how he worked, how much paint. I was thinking that the signing out was hard.
I have a mountain. Yes, I hope that picked up, but okay. I thought you were going to bring up the other story, which where I was painting and the paint was so thick. Do you know where I'm going with this? This is, it started rolling off the canvas.
Oh my God.
I forgot about, wow, okay. Yeah.
How do you ever just line up thinking it?
When I can no longer paint on it. Yeah, they're rarely, it's they're never really done. I think Matisse, or he's said to have said that a painting is never finished. It only stops in interesting places. When I start the paintings, as you said about being restless and all, they'll start out with the colors of Andre Duran, really bright colors. And as Tim mentioned over there, where it'll be incredibly gaudy actually, but then I have to tamp it back, and sometimes I bring it forward and back again. But I feel like I go, that's early 20th century, and then sometimes I go backward to 19th century, and then it's kind of postmodern, I guess you'd say, in a way, just kind of borrowing from everywhere and trying to do something new in that. Yeah. Yes.
Contrasts in your work. That's like force.
The contrast from light to dark you're wondering about?
Contrast. You only contrast. See if I can really affects.
Yes. Yes. I used to paint a lot, literally in black and white, and I shift around. So it's really interesting to me to have two colors that are very close in chroma, very close color, analogous colors basically, but they'll make each other look a little stronger. But they, it's just a kind of a playful attitude toward all that stuff. One day they'll be all black and white again, I suppose. I don't know. And you had a question.
Well, first of all, because I wait. What's interesting? Yours and what makes it wrong. Time it takes to dry. Go back over, see layer after layer. There. You allow it to dry, right? Half dry, go back in again, or scrape.
I know you're a painter yourself, so yes, that's a very good question about, do I allow things to dry, or at what point do I rearrange the color? It's really all over the map, because like I said, sometimes it'll be years. I'll, fortunately get a painting back that I wanted to paint more on. And then sometimes it's a little riskier, I suppose, that you'd wind up with mud if you do it a little too soon. So there's this sweet spot of like where especially if it's thicker paint, where it starts to congeal a bit, and then you can go in and do some really unpredictable things. So, yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
If you go a little bit through the site, are you getting the self-naturalist? Is there a author you like that writes about nature? Or do you like to take classes?
So you're wondering about the science behind some of the work, so that it helped inform it. Yeah, actually, I studied for a while to be a naturalist, because I knew that I forgot to mention this whole thing, but I started out studying art, as I said, and then I hit the road, and I thought, one of the reasons I stopped was I'd read a good deal of Vincent van Gogh's letters to his brother, and I thought, he wasn't crazy, but he wound up dead and with an ear cut off. And I thought, is that the future for me? I'll consult my doctor. I don't know. But the idea of knowing more about nature was deep in me, and I thought, okay, I'll do something else. I'll study to be a naturalist. So I actually pursued that for a couple of years, and so I had some background in that. I wasn't a particular science oriented person, but environmental education was basically what I was studying to do. A lot of writers coming to mind, a lot of them. That's funny that I don't have anything right at the top of my head, but I mean, well, Thoreau for sure. Yeah. But he goes back. It's apocryphal, I think, but I decided to look it up with AI to find out about this. But I always heard that he was one who, that Henry David Thoreau was the one who discovered and realized that tree rings give the age of the tree. And that's just, yeah, they didn't apparently know that before, but I looked it up, and apparently some of the Romans had known it back in the day. Thoreau. But he's great. And that again is 150 years ago. So getting more contemporary, Stegner, and I mean, there's a lot of writers that I appreciate reading. And if you have a list, we'll compare. Okay. Well, thanks again, and all the paintings are here to look at. You could